Hello, book lovers. My name is Carrie Rogers, and this is Spines and Spoilers. I'm in a different location this time, which is going to keep on happening until I move into my new place. I tried to, I don't know, dress it up a little bit, but this is what we have for now. And I'm not liking this angle, so hopefully that will change in the future. But that is what we have. Today, I am talking about my top 20 books of 2020. Don't know why I went 10 for 2020. There we go. But yeah, anyway. Top 20 books of 2020. This is not going to be in any particular order necessarily. I just kind of grabbed all the books, well, not all the books, 20 books that I gave like a 4.5 to a 5, maybe a couple of 4s. But all of these books had some kind of influence on me and stuck with me in some way. I know one of them was literally the first book that I read this year, or last year. Now, the first book on my list is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. I think it was the last book that I read probably in 2020. If not the last book, then the last, good book that really left an impression on me. Blah, blah, blah. If I could talk, that would be great. Anyway, it was such a great book. It basically circulates around, 1, a reporter, and 2, a superstar from the golden age of Hollywood. The reporter is excited because she has been specifically requested by Evelyn Hugo, this superstar from the golden age of Hollywood, to interview her. And no one has any idea why, because this reporter is brand new, has barely put out like a couple of pieces, hasn't really had much of a chance to prove herself yet. So everyone's really confused about why she grabbed this greenhorn out of nowhere, and wants her specifically to do this interview. She shows up to the interview, Evelyn Hugo starts talking, and obviously there's more to it than anyone suspected. It's such a good book. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I will say that it has a decent amount of LGBTQIA plus representation. I really enjoyed it. It's decently diverse. Obviously could be more diverse, but for the time that it was written in, I think that Taylor did a great job. It was also a very quotable book. 3 of my favorite quotes were as follows. Never let anyone make you feel ordinary, which I thought was very poignant. I'm under absolutely no obligation to make sense to you, and don't ignore half of me so you can fit me into a box. Don't do that. And all 3 of those were spoken by Evelyn Hugo, if I remember correctly, who's just this badass character who's honestly, to be fair, a total bitch, but you will love her if you read the book. Totally recommend it. Didn't think that I was going to like it because of the time period that it was set in. Okay, so I had to take a bit of a break because I realized that I had not been wearing my mic the entire time that I was recording. But now it's plugged in, it's on, and it's recording, so, we can continue. But yeah, first book, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Absolutely would recommend. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, maybe 5. I don't know. It was really fucking good. Now, the second book on my list is The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur, I believe is how you pronounce her name. It was an anthology of poetry and contained some of her illustrations. I believe they're illustrated by her as well. And every time I read a book by Rupi Kaur, it moves me very deeply. I come out feeling like I have been scrubbed with like a wire brush, basically, like down to my core. And I feel so fucking raw after I finish reading it in the best way. Her poetry is so poignant and beautiful. And if you like poetry, I 100% recommend it. If you don't like poetry, maybe give it a try, see if it maybe is something that you can get into anyway, because her stuff is just amazing and might be able to get people into it. I'm not generally a person who reads poetry anthologies. but she is absolutely an exception for me. And any time that I see that she has written something, I jump on it at this point. I want to get her new book that's coming out. I think it's Homecoming? Something like that. Starts with home. I'll figure it out. But yeah, I want to get that soon. Here are a few quotes that I particularly enjoyed from the book. The first one is from the poem Legacy, and it reads, "I stand on the sacrifices of a million women before me, thinking, what can I do to make this mountain taller, so the women after me can see farther." I think that might be one of my favorites. The next quote reads, "It isn't what we left behind that breaks me. It's whatever we could have built had we stayed." And I don't remember which poem that was from. I did not annotate that. That is my fault. Then the last is, "We have been dying since we got here and forgot to enjoy the view," from the poem Live Fully. And there's much more than that. That being said, I would warn you going in that there are a lot of trigger warnings that you need to be aware of. There is rape mentioned, eating disorders, abuse, depression, self-doubt, a lot of angst, lots of sex. So definitely be aware of that going in. The third book on my list is a book called Solutions and Other Problems by Ali Broche. She is an individual who runs a webcomic and started turning them into books. Her first book was Hyperbole and a Half, I believe, which is the name of her webcomic as well. And this one is Solutions and Other Problems. I can't tell you how much I have wanted to talk about this book. It's so good. At the time, my husband and I were on different sleep schedules while I was reading this book, and I learned very quickly that I could not read it while he was sleeping because I would start laughing way too hard and wake him up. And I even tried just like stifling myself, but it was like deep, visceral belly laughter. So even that, I would end up like shaking so hard because I am a large person and would wake him up anyway. But yeah, she's a delight. If you haven't read her webcomic, please do. I don't recommend many webcomics, but she's just fucking great. She's the one who originally did the comic that started the meme of "do all the things" with the person holding up a broom. God, I'm aging myself. But yeah, she's a delight. Her book is both extremely funny and also extremely heartwarming and heartbreaking both at once. She goes over a lot of serious issues that she's faced in her life. There's a lot of death mentioned, there's depression mentioned, a lot of things like that, a lot of self-doubt and anxiety, but I would still recommend it to anyone because she takes these issues and she turns them around and often looks at them with a comedic light, which you don't really see very often. And I just realized that I haven't been looking at the camera the whole time, so I've probably just been looking like off to the left in your perspective. But yes, hello, I see you now. Some of my favorite quotes from the book are as follows, without going into it too deeply because it is kind of a visual medium which adds to the impact of the words that are said. Anyway, here we go. When you can explain things to people who are willing to listen to you explain them, it is extremely difficult to resist fully and brutally explaining them. It feels good to explain them. Like, maybe you're getting somewhere. Like, maybe if you can just really explain them, the experiences will realize you're catching on and stop bothering you. Another one is, having to be personally responsible for maintaining justice in the world is distressing. It makes it seem like maybe there's something wrong in the universal fairness and balance department. Like, maybe the higher-ups have lost control and they need help. The last one is, for the sake of trust building, the third chapter will follow the second, but then we will jump directly to chapter 5. Do you understand? No chapter 4. Why? Because sometimes things don't go like they should. Yeah, I love her. I really love her sense of humor. Someone asked me recently if I'd ever felt like someone writes with a similar voice to mine, and I feel like she's fairly close. like maybe her or Caitlin Doty. I know those are two very different people to compare, but yeah, can't recommend it enough. I think I gave this one a 4.5 or a 5 as well. And The Sun and Her Flowers, I realized I didn't mention a rating, but I gave it a 5. Like, I almost didn't even have to read the book to give it a 5. Like, I knew it ahead of time what it was going to be. I love it so fucking much. Number 4 is a book that I had been wanting to read for quite a while. It's Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. It's kind of hard to explain this book, but I think that it is one that everyone should probably read. It's extremely humorous. He's able to turn extremely dark topics into comedy, like, and not in a way which is, edgy humor, which is just, racist jokes in disguise. No, he takes stories of his life and is able to put a comedic spin on them, and is also able to do so in a way which touches your heart. A little bit of a backstory. Trevor Noah was born in South Africa during the time of apartheid, and he was the child of, I believe, a black woman and a white man, which at the time was illegal. He was born a crime. So the title of the book is basically his childhood, and basically covers his life from birth until the present. And I enjoyed it from start to finish. I think I gave it a 4.5 or a 5. I can't quite remember. But I enjoyed every bit of it. Here are a few of the quotes that I enjoyed from the book. I don't regret anything I've ever done in my life, any choice that I've made, but I'm consumed with regret for the things that I didn't do, the choices I didn't make, the things I didn't say. We spend so much time being afraid of failure, afraid of rejection, but regret is the thing we should fear most. Failure is an answer. Rejection is an answer. Regret is an eternal question you will never have the answer to. What if? If only. I wonder what would have. You will never, never know. And it will haunt you for the rest of your days. The next one is, Nelson Mandela once said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. He was so right. When you make the effort to speak to someone else's in someone else's language, even if it's just basic phrases here and there, you are saying to them, I understand that you have a culture and identity that exists beyond me. I see you as a human being. The last one is, relationships are built in the silences. You spend time with people, you observe them and interact with them, and you come to know them. And that is what apartheid stole from us. Time. Now, I'm aware that none of those three quotes are like, oh, side-achingly funny, but I do think they're very poignant. I do think they're important, and I think that the entire book has a lot to say and a lot to offer. I will say this about the book. There aren't many things that I read that make me, like, start to reconsider my faith as well. I'm not getting religious. Please trust me. But this one actually did a little bit as well. Not like to any extreme, but it made me for a second be like, yeah, that's something to think about. And I thought about it and was like, yeah, no, it wasn't. But yeah, you get what I mean. It's extremely influential, poignant. Give it a try if you have the time. The audiobook in particular is amazing because Trevor Noah reads it himself and adds all of these little nuances that you probably wouldn't get with just reading it yourself. My fifth book is So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Aluo, I believe is how her name is pronounced. Excuse me, because apparently I can't talk today. I'm getting all kinds of tongue-tied and I have no idea why. Maybe I had too much caffeine earlier. But this is an extremely important talk about race in general, and how it has affected her life and how it affects many others, and why we, as white people, need to actually start, like, listening to the people who are trying to talk about race, and the way that it affects other people, and the way, and the amount of privilege that we have just by being white. Some of my favorite quotes from this book are as follows. Being privileged does not mean that you are always wrong and people without privilege are always right. It means that there is a good chance you are missing a few very important pieces of the puzzle. The next is, disadvantaged white people are not erased by discussions of disadvantages facing people of color, just as brain cancer is not erased by talking about breast cancer. There are two different issues with two different treatments, and they require two different conversations. The last is to refuse to listen to someone's cries for justice and equality until the request comes in a language you feel comfortable with as a way of asserting your dominance over them and the situation. I think all of those are very important. I think that a lot of the things that she has to say are extremely important. Also, I am talking a little quieter because I'm pretty sure someone just got home and the walls here are extremely thin. And it embarrasses me to have people listening to me doing apparently much of anything. Yeah, that was So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Oluo. Definitely check it out. I believe it is available on Kindle, as is Solutions and Other Problems. And I found The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo on Audible, I believe, as well as Born a Crime. And I just bought a physical copy of The Sun and Her Flowers. The rest of these are pretty much all audiobooks, which is why you're going to get a nice picture probably around here. I don't know. Talk to future me. Number 6 is a little bit baffling to me because it's odd to think that all of these books were read on the same year, because it feels to me like I read this book like 2 years ago, maybe, just, long ago. But alas, it was in the before times, before COVID hit. So I was just reading it for fun rather than because I was secluded to my house without a choice. But yes, number 6 is Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Lafanu, I believe is how you pronounce his name. It is a very old gothic horror type thing. It's one of the very first vampire novels. It helped inspire Bram Stoker's Dracula and a lot of other tales. It's also one of the earliest LGBT stories, and it got away with it because one of them was a vampire, and that makes me so happy that Fanu scraped by the censors because he was able to say, oh no, it's fine because she's technically not human. So, because, that's better. But yeah, that made me really happy because, spooky lesbians. But yeah, I thought that the overall atmosphere and mood was great. Obviously, there's a bit of a barrier when it comes to language. If you just don't like the style that books like that from the olden days have, then maybe avoid this. It might not be your thing, but if you're okay with that and you can get past it, I definitely would recommend it. It is basically about a girl and her father who live in what amounts to a castle, basically. And one day, this carriage wrecks in front of their castle, and a woman comes out and claims to be very ill, and they insist that she stays with them for a while until she feels better, and her other companions can go on to where they're headed because she shouldn't be traveling while she's sick. And she's like, oh, okay, well, if you insist. And as time goes on, you start hearing about all of these attacks that are coming in the night, and they think it's a wild animal or something like that. No one has any idea what's going on. Also, excuse me if I get any of this wrong. It has been quite a while since I read it. But yeah. And as time goes on, Carmilla and the protagonist, whose name I can't remember, they get closer and closer, and the entire time they have this intense chemistry and this physical draw to one another, and are very affectionate to one another. Quite affectionate, wouldn't you say, for two women? But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great book. I thought that the build-up was great. Obviously, you kind of know going in what it is, but I imagine back when it was originally released, it was a little bit baffling, and you didn't quite know what to expect, and didn't necessarily know what was going on, and people might have been scandalized by the women, I don't know, but either way, I think it's delightful. Alright, one of the first quotes that I would like to read is, "Thus fortified I may take my rest in peace, But dreams come through stone walls, light up dark rooms, or darken light ones, and their persons make their exits and their entrances as they please, and laugh at locksmiths. I think the language is really fun. Another is, if your dear heart is wounded, my wild heart bleeds with yours, which is very short, but succinct. And the next and last is, but curiosity is a restless and scrupulous passion, and no one girl can endure with patience that hers should be baffled by another. And again, that was Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. I believe I found that one on Kindle. I'm pretty sure. I'm not positive. It's been quite a while. I read it back in January or February. Like I said, in the before times, which seem far longer ago than they are. But the next book is kind of in a similar boat, and it's actually 2 books, because I read the first one and the second one back to back, and it basically is just congealed into one book in my head, and that is Jurassic Park and Lost World by Michael Crichton. All of you have probably heard of these 2 books, but you've more likely heard of the movies, and I have to say that there are a lot of differences, but in these cases I do prefer the books. I think they're really enjoyable. That being said, Jurassic Park is like one of my favorite movies. How could it not be? It's dinosaurs. But yeah, if you want to, give it a chance. I'm not gonna go on about this one. Everyone fucking knows what Jurassic Park and The Lost World are about. You know, finding dinosaur DNA, making them real again in the present time, yada yada yada. Shenanigans ensue. Number 8 is by an author that I am slowly just starting to love everything that they do, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I recently read We Sold Our Souls as well, which was really good, and Paperbacks from Hell, which was also very good, not as good as the other 2, and I have like all of his books on my TBR at this point. But yes, My Best Friend's Exorcism is about 2 best friends who have kind of grown up together, and one day they are out at the lake with some of their friends just fooling around, and they tried mushrooms, I think it is, for the first time, and one of them disappears and doesn't show up until hours later and looks like she's been attacked. After this point, she slowly starts acting stranger and stranger and stranger, and until her friend starts to suspect that maybe something more is going on, and find out that she has been possessed and has to figure out how in the world she is going to handle this situation, because she's just a teenage girl and no one else in the town believes her, and her friend is basically completely gone. It is both, it's a relatively funny read, but it's also touching, and it's just fun. I loved reading it. You know, I don't know if you like the kind of like 80s vibe and like spooky horror, and with just like a little bit of like teen angst thrown in, I'd recommend it. I really enjoyed it. But here are some of the quotes from the book that I enjoyed. She could decide how she was going to be. She had a choice. Life could be an endless series of joyless chores, or she could get totally pumped and make it fun. There were bad things and there were good things, but she got to choose which things to focus on. Her mom focused on only the bad things, and Abby didn't have to. Now, here's another one. Corn dogs, the Exorcist said, are all the proof I need that there is a God. The third is, you have a smile like fire and eyes like thunder, and you make servants kill their masters and children kill their parents. You are the devourer of stars, the destroyer of time, the rash solution, the cleaving that can never be rejoined, giver of dooming rage. And I have one more on this one, just because it's fun. By the power of Phil Collins, I rebuke you. Again, that was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I found it on Audible, I believe, but I think it's also available on Kindle, and also, you know, like Barnes & Noble, the usual physical book sources. The next book, number 9, is one that I have been told to read for years. It's my girlfriend's favorite book and was coincidentally given to me by my boyfriend, and that is Lamb by Christopher Moore. Now, this one might be one that people want to skip ahead on. If you are Christian and you are highly sensitive about the topic, then maybe skip ahead, because this is a little sacrilegious. But it follows the story of Biff, who is Christ's childhood pal, who is a little bit more crass than Jesus, and definitely gets up to a lot of shenanigans. I won't go into a lot, but it was a fun book to read. I'm glad that I finally gave it a chance. It was one of my favorite books of the year, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to be one of my favorite books, like, overall, like, you know, hey man, you need to read this book. But yeah, it was pretty good. It was good. I would recommend it still. I thought it was really funny. It was oddly sentimental in some points. It was written in a way which was very witty because it's done by Christopher Moore, and he's an absolute delight. If you haven't read some of his other work, then you should definitely check some of it out. The first quote is, "That's the difference between irony and sarcasm. Irony can be spontaneous, while sarcasm requires volition. You have to create sarcasm." The next is, "If you have come to these pages for laughter, may you find it. If you are here to be offended, may your ire rise and your blood boil. If you seek an adventure, may the song sing you away to blissful escape. If you need to test or confirm your beliefs, may you reach comfortable conclusions. All books reveal perfection by what they are or what they are not. May you find that which you seek in these pages or outside them. May you find perfection and know it by name." The last one is, "This story is not and never was meant to challenge anyone's faith. However, if one's faith can be shaken by stories in a humorous novel, one may have a bit more praying to do." Again, that was Lamb by Christopher Moore. I had got a physical copy of it for Christmas, I believe, from my boyfriend. The next book, number 10, is another one that all of you have already heard of, and that is Jaws by Peter Benchley. I'm guessing that a lot of you may not have known that it was a book, because I definitely did not. When I found it, I stumbled across it, I believe on Audible, and was like, okay, yeah, let's give this a try. I thought it was really interesting. There's a little bit more to the book than the movie. There's a little bit of stuff that you're missing. There's an affair, there's intrigue, but for the most part, you probably already know what you're going to get going in. Just maybe if you want to get a little bit more and maybe dive a little bit more into the story of Jaws, look into it. Again, that was Jaws by Peter Benchley. I'm not going to give you quotes because you know what it is already. Number 11, similarly, is one which you already know and are not going to need a summary for or quotes or anything like that. It's The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And yeah, I'm sure you already know the story of that. If you want a quick summary of both of them, Jaws is huge shark eating people. That is basically the summary. And The Exorcist is a little girl, I can't remember how old she is, I think she's around like 11 or 12, becomes possessed by a demon. And they have to try to find a way to exorcise the demon. And it was more disturbing, honestly, than the movie to me. I got goosebumps multiple times reading the book rather than watching the movie. Not that the movie isn't disturbing, but yeah, if you really like to kind of like simmer and creepiness, definitely look into it, definitely. I'm gonna stop saying definitely now. Number 12 is, again, two books that I read so close together they kind of blended into one in my mind, and that is The Troll and Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. They are the sequels to Scythe. That being said, I can't really tell you much about it, other than the fact that in this world, people basically have nanobots that help heal them extremely quickly, to the point where people don't really die naturally, and thus there have been people selected to work as scythes, you know, who are chosen to kill people, basically. And each one does it in a different way to some extent, but there are laws which are laid out for how they can perform their job. As you can imagine, shenanigans ensue. But yeah, can't tell you a lot about the Troll or Thunderhead because it would give you major spoilers from the first book. But I will say that I enjoyed the entire series, and I also enjoyed the fact that I think it was in Thunderhead there was actually non-binary representation, which you never see, like, ever. The next book is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, which pairs well with number 14, which is also by Agatha Christie, that is And They Were None. I didn't pair them as one in this case because I didn't read them back to back. They were simply written by the same person. And they weren't really based on the same story. They weren't both based on Poirot or anything like that. It's another case where I can only tell you so much because otherwise I'm going to give you spoilers. But Murder on the Orient Express basically follows Poirot, who I'm sure you've heard of. Hercule Poirot, I believe is his name. It has been a little while. And he is on a train and someone ends up being murdered and he has to figure out who did it. But the problem is that everyone there seems pretty shady. Then the next one is And Then There Were None, is a similar situation. It's very Clue-esque. Basically, several people are invited out to a mansion. I think it's on an island in the middle of nowhere. And someone ends up murdered and they're trying to figure out the entire time who is doing it. And it's this whole, like, murder most foul, and I think it was, like, one of the originals. But if you like that type of thing, definitely recommend it. Agatha Christie is, like, the original, and if you haven't read any of her work, then I definitely recommend it because she's wonderful, and she knew exactly what she was doing. And to read some of the work of someone who inspired just so much amazing mystery, fictional mysteries. I don't know how to phrase that. But yes, just inspired such amazing literature and films. You know, let's see what came out. Knives Out. That's a good example. That was one of my favorite movies from last year. That'll have to be a separate list if we're doing that. But yeah, that was even Knives Out was inspired by Agatha Christie's novels. It was inspired in some ways by Agatha Christie and things like Clue and stuff like that. But yeah, I digress. Number 15, I think, is the only non-fiction book I have on this list, and that is Black Market by Michael Goodwin or Michelle Goodwin. I'm not sure which, honestly. Okay, for this one, I had to look up a summary because it's been so fucking long. It was since February. I just remembered that I really liked it. So basically, it is about our system of transportations and the waiting lists which have resulted, and the lengths that people will go to in order to kind of go around the transplantation list. Also, sorry that it's getting a bit dark in here. It's kind of getting dark slowly outside, so the background is probably going to continue getting darker and darker. Number 16 is actually 3 books in one that I read back to back to back, so they kind of blended into one. And that was Hollow City, A Map of Days, and Library of Souls by Ransom Riggs. Now, I read Miss Peregrine's Home of Peculiar Children, I believe it was called, about 2 years ago, I think. And I did not enjoy it. I really did not. And the only reason that I ended up giving any of these sequels a try was Hollow City was free on Audible, for one thing, and I was looking for free books, was stuck inside, and I had heard that eventually it kind of gets better. So I gave it another try and figured out that, yeah, I really just didn't like the first book. All the rest of them have been excellent, and I kind of can't wait to read The Conference of the Birds, and I don't remember the last one that has come out, but yeah, there are like 2 more, I believe, and I really fucking want to read them. Yeah, I definitely enjoy them. Can't give much away because spoilers, because they're sequels. But yes, basically follows the same children from Miss Peregrine's Home of Peculiar Children, and the main character therein. Yeah, I am a mess today. Alright, if I can talk now, number 17 is The Accidental Alchemist by Gigi Pandion, I believe. Yeah, Pandion. No idea how to pronounce that. That's as close as I'm probably gonna get. But yes, this one was another one that I randomly discovered on Audible when I was just scrolling through looking for free books, basically, and I accidentally landed on this one and just started listening to it to see if it might be anything interesting, and then, like, next thing I knew, it was several chapters in, and I was, like, fucking hooked. But it is about an alchemist who is basically trying to escape her past, but she is moving into this new house. Well, new, it's basically debilitated, and she's gonna fix it up. Has plans to fix it up. And as she is moving in, she finds this 3.5-foot gargoyle who has stowed away in her things, who immediately starts talking to her. And as you can imagine, she is pretty much straight away like, this is probably not normal. I'm probably being stalked by someone who is able to do magic. And then shortly after that, she ends up finding a dead body on her porch, and chaos ensues. Anyway, I thought it was an extremely creative concept. I really enjoyed reading it. I especially enjoyed that I just stumbled across it and I didn't have to, you know, go off of someone else's recommendation. I really like it when that happens, when I just accidentally find something on my own, because it doesn't happen very often with BookTube. I think one of my favorite parts of this was probably the banter that goes back and forth between the protagonist and the gargoyle. He's a bit of a sassy butthole, and I really enjoyed it. I don't really have a lot of quotes that I saved, unfortunately. That was one that I was basically just reading for me, and then ended up happening to enjoy it, so I stuck it on the list. But that was number 17, Accidental Alchemist by Gigi Pandion, I think is how she pronounces it. Maybe. Number 18 is a very short book, and it is A Guide to Troubled Birds by Matt Adrian. I'll go ahead and read you the description on Goodreads so you can kind of get a feel for what this is, but I will go ahead and say that it is a comedy. An illustrated pocket field guide that enables anyone to quickly identify psychotic, violent, or mentally unstable bird species. We are only just discovering the reality of our avian adversaries with their reptilian brains, their appetites for mayhem, and the fact that they fly mostly to spite us. To ignore the information found within this volume may be at the peril of your very life. But yes, it was a comedy. It was basically like a little comic-oriented, and read it in one sitting, less than an hour, but it's very enjoyable. Give it a try if you think you would like something like that. Also, another thing that I'm noticing is that I have a lot of comedies on my list this year, which doesn't happen very often. I'm not one who generally reads a lot of comedies. Usually they end up on my worst books of the year list, but maybe I just needed a laugh this year. I can't imagine why. Also, my kitty's in the background. Ezra! She doesn't give a fuck. This is my baby Ezra, who some of you will have met and some of you may not have. She is a chunk, and she is also a sweet lady. She has decided that she is not into this anymore. But she will be with us for the rest of this video. Probably. Possibly. She's looking out the window. Okay. Number 19 is another book that you have likely all heard of, at least in the movie sense. There were a lot of those this year. That was the Emeryville Horror by Jay Anson. And to summarize very quickly, it's about a family. They move into a house, this large, gorgeous house, and they're like, why would anyone leave this behind? And quickly figure out that things are not necessarily as they seem, starting to suspect that it's haunted, and that the father in particular is being affected in a very negative way. All of them are, but it is affecting the father in particular the most, I believe. The movie is great, but the book was also wonderful. It was kind of written in the style of, it was switching perspectives a bit. Kind of went back and forth between the husband and the wife and the priest, to kind of get an account of everything that happened, and is kind of told in a way that suggests that this was something which actually happened, and ooh, you need to watch out for them haunted houses. But yeah, probably something you've heard of before. Not really anything new. I really enjoyed it though. One of the things that I ended up doing during like the early part of the quarantine was going through a lot of horror novels and books which were based on horror movies, and kind of reading as many of them as I could. There was also The Invisible Man, and I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, there were a lot of them. My brain just is not working today, apparently, as you have seen. But yeah, this was one of my favorites. The Invisible Man was also really good, but not quite good enough to make it onto my list, sadly. Number 20 is actually a bit of a cheat, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit of a weak spot to end on. But it was a kid's book, not just, you know, YA or middle grade or anything like that. Very much a kid's book. It was called Ladybug Girl and the Rescue Dogs by David Saman and Jackie Davis. And it was this adorable book that my niece, I suppose we'll call her for now, my boyfriend's stepdaughter. So don't know what you would call that. Polywog, I think, is the common term in the polyamorous community. But yes, she has requested that I read this book over and over and over to her, and each time that I read it, I enjoy it a little bit more. It's kind of adorable. There's basically this little superhero named Ladybug Girl, and she has her two friends, like Grasshopper Girl and Bumblebee Boy, I think, and they solve like everyday issues. In this case, they find out that there are a lot of rescue dogs who need owners, and they try to help out the people working at the shelter as much as they can, and come up with the idea to basically have a parade of dogs through the town so that people can see them. And it's just a really adorable, wholesome book that I really enjoyed. I mean, maybe I'll put up some of the pictures of the dogs so you can see, but it like goes through and like names all the dogs that are there and like tells you about their personalities, and it's just so damn cute. I don't even care that there's not some really thick, dense, pretentious book at number 20 on this list. I genuinely do not care, and I don't care that it beat out several other books that some of you are probably going to scold me for not putting on here. I don't care. It's adorable. I love it. I read it to her any chance that I get. So, you know, there. Well, that brings me to the end of my top 20 books of 2020. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're all staying safe out there, taking care of yourselves, wearing your masks, please, when you go out in public, if you have to. Stay home if you can. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and most importantly, love yourself. Bye.